Welcome to Taking the Higher Road. I'm Leah Shaver, President and CEO of the National Transportation Institute. Each week, we interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver life cycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges, driver, and this week, technician recruiting and retention. I'd like to thank and highlight the show's valuable sponsors. Their dedication and commitment to the industry and to this show is greatly appreciated. Today, I am excited to be talking to a longtime colleague and a tenacious leader in our industry, Amanda Schuier. Not only has Amanda spent the last 20 years of her career as a recruiting and retention leader in our industry, she has now been installed as the chair of the ATA's Technology and Maintenance Council, a role she's worked over a decade toward moving into. There is no one more experienced in our industry in tying together the themes of recruiting and retaining diesel technicians and professional drivers. Talk about the ideal guest for this show. Amanda, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Leah. I'm so excited to be here and talk about some of my favorite things in the industry.
We are going to get down to the nitty-gritty today. You and I met in 2016, and even at that time, you were on a course to be in the role that you ascended to in March, that of the chair of the ATA Technology and Maintenance Council, well known in our industry simply as TMC. But you've been on this path even well before that, I think going back maybe since 2018, maybe. Give us the quick backstory as to why you sought out the role in the first place, what it means to you now after so many years of working that path to get here.
So I have been in the industry since 2006, and I think in about 2008 is when I decided that I wanted to be the general chairman of TMC. And to be totally honest, I'm not exactly sure why I decided that I had that goal for myself, but I think when I started attending TMC and meeting some of the people there and just interacting with that group, I just decided okay, this is a goal of mine. I really want to chair this organization someday. And so that was a goal I set for myself back in 2008. So yes, as of March, I finally achieved that goal, which I'm really excited about.
It's a movie quote and one that I often bring up, but it's, do you have a goal? And it sounds like you did. Let's talk more about your plans for this year as head of TMC. You've mentioned that you want to make engagement a top priority during your term. Tell us about what that means to you and what you hope to accomplish in the coming year.
Yeah, at our changing of the guard ceremony, which is basically when I took over as chairman, one of the themes I announced for the year was engagement. So engagement, I think is a big word to me because obviously at Jetco, that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years as well. But I think to me, TMC at its heart is a volunteer organization. And so I think encouraging our members to just get more involved, be active in the participation, championing the industry is really what I mean by engagement. It's not only within TMC, but also I think bringing light to, the technician shortage and how TMC can really interact with other organizations in the industry. So that's one of my biggest goals for my year as chair.
Excellent. Going back to when you and I met in 2016 at that year's Women in Trucking Accelerate Conference, I feel like the industry was at a turning point then, starting to embrace gender diversity, and that it has become a much larger focus by industry groups like ATA, TCA, and of course, Women in Trucking, and I'm sure many others. We've seen more women excel into leadership positions at the fleet level, and of course, just in general with folks like you and me trying to work hard on the paths that we've been on. So the industry has made great strides, and we shouldn't be shy about that fact. But one part of the industry where we're still working on growing gender diversity is in the area that you've made such a pillar of your career: truck maintenance and repair, diesel technicians, etc. As chair of TMC, how can you use your role and your plans for engagement to try to bridge that gap?
It's a really good question. And, I think since you and I have both been involved in the industry for a while now, to your point, I think we're seeing so much more diversity, in our industry. And it makes me really excited to really see that growth in diversity, because when I started in this industry, it definitely wasn't, to the point that it is now. So I think that, in TMC as an organization, we're also seeing that diversity. Of course, I want more of it. But, I think it comes back to, for me and you, I would imagine too, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think really for me, it's mentoring. And so because I've been successful in this industry and the role that I'm in, one of the ways that I can give back is to mentor. And so at TMC, obviously, I encourage that, with our female participants, really all of our participants. But I think that the more females in the industry who get involved as mentors, I think that'll help, the future women who want to grow their careers really identify with a person who has gotten to that point in their career. I think that's critical.
Yeah, be the change you wish to see. So here you are, in the spotlight, on the stage, behind the mic, whatever, wherever it is, wherever you are, calling attention to the opportunity is certainly a great way. And I've found, in really since 2016, during the course of my leadership with women in trucking, is simply by asking the question, are there women here? Where do we see those women, and are there opportunities for advancement? So I'm excited to see that. I know that you're going to excel in this role, and I can't wait to recap with you in a year about all that you accomplished. So let's talk about your day job, because you're not only chair of TMC, you're also have spent your career working as a leader in recruiting and retention at the fleet level, both drivers and diesel techs, including your current role at Jetco, where you're strategic maintenance supervisor. Prior to that, you were director of employee engagement at Jetco, which you mentioned before. And before that, you held several other prominent recruiting roles at various other fleets. As always, with everyone we interview on the show, I'm curious, how did you get into trucking? What drew you to recruiting specifically? Give us the cliff notes, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm actually a fourth generation trucking member. My great grandfather owned a trucking company, and then my grandfather owned that company and then also opened a Mack dealership. And then my uncle and dad were involved at the dealership. And then obviously I got involved in trucking. The thing that's different about me, though, is I didn't go to college with the intention of working in trucking. My degree's in journalism. I was actually laid off from a job. I was looking for a job, and in Kansas City, there was a marketing position at a truck dealership. And so because I have marketing in my background, I'm like, oh, this, sounds like a good position for me. So I applied, got the position, and I quickly figured out at the time I was working in the corporate environment, but I kept sneaking downstairs to where the dealership was because there was so much more action there, right? And like there were parts people on the phone, and there were, drivers bringing in their trucks that needed service. And I fell in love with more of that lifestyle and like just the busyness of it, every single day being different. And so that's kind of how I got hooked in trucking. And then, I made the switch to recruiting, part of the way through my career. And I think for me, I don't know that I wanted to go into recruiting at first, if that makes sense. Like to be honest, but once I started talking to the drivers and started hearing some of their stories and realized how many of them had bad recruiting experiences, to me, I think that was a light bulb moment that I was like, wow, this industry can do things better, right? And so I think once I started having those conversations with the drivers is probably when I really got hooked in recruiting.
Excellent. I'm excited to hear about the turn then to technicians. So, in your experience, give us some notes on what you've seen as key differences then between recruiting and retaining drivers versus recruiting and retaining diesel techs. I'm going to split the question kind of in half here. So what are the points of emphasis that make a diesel technician want to join a company versus drivers, and any similarities? And this is all in the recruiting aspect.
Sure. I mean, hiring is tough right now, right? We all know that. I think that, at Jetco, one of the advantages we have is our drivers are home daily. So I would almost wager to say that for me, it's harder to hire a tech right now. I think that when I'm looking at, hiring technicians, I think one of the things that techs like to see, and this is true for drivers too, but I think more so for technicians, is I know they like to see a defined career progression. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but, I think they're looking for tool incentives, looking for specific opportunities for training is a question that I get asked a lot. So, I think honestly, for both, it's hard to hire right now, but I think that Our safety culture is something that our technicians look for. And I think work-life balance is a really big one. That's big again for drivers and technicians, but I'm definitely seeing it on the technician side a lot more as well.
Well, to support your point about recruiting diesel techs right now, we do a lot of research in this area, and every single fleet says that recruiting and retaining techs today is as hard as it was to recruit and retain drivers in 2021. So I would say that most fleets listening are going to support your perspective. So let's see what you think about retention. What are the points of emphasis on retention? And asked another way, what are the reasons that diesel techs leave compared to reasons that drivers often turn over? And how do you recommend that companies work to resolve common concerns for technicians?
Yeah, I think we're a smaller fleet, right? So I have the luxury of being able to go out and talk with our techs pretty regularly. I think that open line of communication is really important for retention in general, right? Be it techs or drivers. I think for the most part, when I see technicians leave, a lot of times it can be for, chasing a little bit more money, something like that. But a lot of times too, we've been fortunate that our technicians have come back, right? And so I think to me that speaks to kind of the culture that we're trying to grow in our shop. And I think that having the right leadership in place to kind of guide the technicians as they progress through their career has been really important. So this year, one of the things retention wise that I'm really focusing on is our training efforts. Because last year when I sat down with the team at the end of the year, one of the things they said is, Amanda, we need more training. We want to learn. We are like sponges right now. And so I said, okay, once a quarter, like we're going to have a planned out training session. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's something that we hadn't done in the past. And so far, we've had 2 trainings already this year, and the techs have been really eating it up. So that's important. Those are important things. I think too, from a retention standpoint, if you say you're going to do something for the team, then follow up on that and do it, right? That's another key point that I would make. That's true for drivers and techs, though, for sure.
Follow through is
Yes.
important to anyone in any kind of expectation for sure. And last question in this particular subject, just in terms of like recruiting and retaining, but any more exciting thing that you've seen other companies do to attract and retain technicians? Any kind of innovative approach to recruiting technicians at companies that you think lead in this area that you've had the privilege of seeing in terms of your scope at TMC?
So I don't know if you've seen some of the draft day posts on LinkedIn, but those have been going across my LinkedIn lately, and those are fantastic. We have to do more things like that. So a lot of that is students who are planning to pursue careers in technical education. So, welding, diesel tech, et cetera. It's the same as like getting drafted for sports, right? But they're getting drafted to start a career in technical education. Fantastic. We have to do more of that. I think I have a friend, I'm not going to name his company, but I have a friend who buys the tools for the student right out of school, but then keeps the tools if the student leaves. And I think that's a genius idea because a lot of times, quite honestly, the student never leaves and he's now equipped them with the tools they need to start their job. So, we see a lot of sign-on bonuses right now. I think with training too, sending technicians to get OEM training. I think that's a really important one that fleets can focus on. So, I'm bringing training some in-house, but I think also giving our technicians, the opportunity to go out for training at the OEM and get really, really intense training. I think that's a good thing that fleets can consider too as well.
I do too, especially because you're almost exposing them to potential competition, right?
Sure.
A lot of fleets work very hard to retain their techs in true, frankly, fear of them leaving to work at an OEM. So, I think it's awesome, and especially with all of the technology and expansion of the industry and the equipment that we're operating, it's key to help them continue to develop and, as you said, exercise their way on that career path. As many of us in the industry know, the driver shortage, or at least the challenges fleets face in hiring and maintaining their desired headcount, is always a prominent issue, top of mind, focus of at conferences and in trade journals and in conversations like the one that we're having. But the
Sure.
technician shortage is just as big of an issue, if not more, today, and doesn't really receive the type of attention that driver challenges do. Why do you think that is? And how do we further grow that conversation as an industry, as employers, and of course, as recruiting leaders?
I mean, having conversations just like this one. And like you said, the data is backing it up. The ATRI data as well says that, the diesel technician shortage is on the forefront of the minds, of motor carriers across the country. So, I think in general, right, like there's just a lack of focus on careers in trucking in general, right? So drivers, technicians, et cetera. So I think the more of us who go out and have these conversations, about trucking and the careers that it can provide, we have to continue to do that. This Wednesday I'm headed to the local high school, going to talk about careers in trucking and, work with them, because a lot of these kids have really negative connotations, toward the industry. I go to career fairs where I'm the trucking booth in between, the nurses and the doctors and the lawyers. And we certainly need all of those people. But I think a lot of younger members, don't really consider the industry. I think too, one of the things I learned when I was doing Call in Washington last year is kids cannot use a 529 savings account for technical school. So that's insane to me. That's something that, like, as an industry, we have to fix. Like our future members of the industry should be able to use their 529s to be a diesel tech, right? It's like things like that I think collectively we all really need to work on to improve kind of our industry's image.
When you were talking about ATRI, it came to mind that when the driver shortage really peaked in recent history, we saw more and more marketing experts heading over to be an active part of recruiting departments. So recruiting departments were no longer only outsourcing their marketing. They had someone working internally. They also had someone doing their own internal social media campaigns. And as you were talking about the research and how it's now top in fleet's concerns, it strikes me that one great opportunity is to use those same resources towards technician recruiting and engagement, as we have now done and do for professional drivers. And I think to that, we talk about the need to implement and promote career paths for drivers so that they can envision their career growing and evolving over the years. And those career paths can take a lot of different shapes. So what about that on the tech recruiting side? You mentioned career path in terms of greater training. Is there any kind of a view or vision of what a career path can look like? And how can it be appropriately articulated to our people, or maybe importantly, our potential people?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because when I first took over the shop, one of the first things I did was work with our marketing team to make a brochure that was literally about this. It was literally about, the progression as a diesel technician. And so I think, one of the things I always ask entry-level techs is, where do you see yourself going? Like, do you want to be the service manager? Or maybe if you don't want to be a service manager, maybe you want to work in the parts room. Maybe you want to manage the warranty. Like, maybe you want to be a technician all your life, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think giving them the information to help them understand what the choices are, and then saying, okay, if you do want to be the warranty manager, this is what you're going to need to do to get there. If you want to be a service advisor and you want to call our drivers and say, well, this is what we found with your truck and these are the repairs, then you're going to need communication classes. You're going to need to learn how to interact in customer service. Like, I think that, it's not just fixing the truck these days, but like you said, there's many different paths for a diesel tech. So like I said, we made this brochure. We take that to every career fair we go to now. And I think just being able to articulate that right to the younger generation, that like, even if you do decide to wrench or fix the trucks for a couple years, there are certainly a lot of paths, computer diagnostics. Like there's a lot that you can do once you do some of that initial work.
That's awesome. The point about communication and potentially classes that it takes in order to become the leader that you want to be. We see this in drivers and training. Tenure and experience and safe operation don't all make for an ideal leader or trainer. They do make for a great example of an amazing driver. But that doesn't mean that that person is going to be fabulous in a very small space training many people, right? So to your point, investing in folks exactly in the direction that they want to go, and like we've mentioned a few different times here today, asking the question really helps someone point that compass in the direction that the technician really wants to head. So good on you for doing that, and I love the idea. I want to end on this topic because I think it's so relevant and important to this conversation and to what's happening in the industry right now. You and I recently talked about the need for companies to continue to invest in employee engagement, even and especially in a tougher freight cycle that we've been in for so very long at this point. At the same time, many companies are simply pulling back in that area, often with good justification internally, but also could be that they don't think the costs are justified when hiring isn't as pressing as it was during the post-COVID recovery. Why do you think it's important that fleets are active in communicating with their people, hearing their feedback and concerns, acting on that feedback, asking the questions, as you pointed out, and trying to continue to promote job satisfaction and retention, even in a market like the one that we're in now? And after you answer, what are some strategies that you would recommend as a long-time recruiting and retention leader?
Yeah, it's tough right now, isn't it? It's every time I think we're like turning that corner, we just dig a little more down. But I think engagement, obviously is a passion of mine, and so I would always make an argument that engagement is important at any time. But I think I would make the argument that it's most important in times like these, because I think that's when you can't necessarily just throw money at your employee to make them stay, right? So that's when I think you look at, why do they keep coming to work? Why do they keep doing the job that they do, especially when it's tough, right? Is it, the safety culture at Jetco? Is it their relationship with their driver manager? Is it the training they're learning from their shop manager, right? It's like, I think that engagement gives us a chance to really help us understand kind of what makes our employees tick, and then what we can do to kind of help ease that burden, because we're all going through it right now. And like I said, it's not just something that you can throw money at to fix, right? And so I think fleets are having to get creative and think of ways where, we can help ease some of that burden, because we're all going through it. And so, in terms of like, I rephrase your question again, but I think it was, things that we can do to kind of help with engagement. Is that right?
Well, yeah, strategies you'd recommend, in terms of ongoing engagement, communication, and really shedding the weight of the environment that we're in right now, while continuing to really marvel in the progress that we've made, and putting the pressure on folks and leaders to stick to their guns when it comes to engagement and retention.
Yeah, I think it really starts at the top, and the communication from company C-suite executives, the way that that's communicated to the drivers, to the technicians, to their frontline employees. I think transparency in that messaging is key. I think any employee can see through something that's not truthful, and so I think communicating messages importantly with that sense of transparency is really important. I think being consistent with your messaging is important. I think nothing's worse than like starting an idea and throwing it out there and then just never doing anything again. So I guess that goes back to my following through comment. I think casual check-ins with employees, how are things going? Sometimes those make a huge difference. They don't have to be, scripted out messages. They don't necessarily have to be, I'm going to check in once a week, every Friday at noon. Just casual conversations, asking, about life outside of work, things like that. I think those make all the difference in the world.
Sounds like say what you mean what you say, and importantly, do what you say are key. And all such good tips that you just shared with us. We'll probably tally them up and reshare them with everyone.
Sure.
I want to congratulate you on your appointment as chair of TMC. And thank you so much for your time and for sharing so much great information and so many insights with us. I know I really look forward to watching you influencing more female leaders in the tech space and, of course, seeing you out on the road soon.
Thanks, Leah.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of Taking the Higher Road. Stay tuned for next week's show when Jeremy Raymer returns for another fantastic conversation in this space. Please note that your feedback is very important to us, and your kind reviews keep us on the hunt for more great talent like Amanda to put in front of you. Please remember to rate and review Taking the Higher Road on whatever platform you are listening to today. And once again, a special thanks to the sponsors of today's show. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.